The Instant Pot might be the most useful tool in the entire kitchen, and most folks only ever use it for 2 or 3 things. Big mistake. These are the 10 things I actually make in mine every single week. The ones that save me the most time and the most money, ranked from the cleverest right down to the comfort food classics. We're kicking off with the one that makes people stop and say, wait, you can make that? Yogurt. A whole gallon of it for the price of a gallon of milk, which is a tiny fraction of what those little cups run you at the store. Here's the entire trick. You pour milk into the pot and heat it to a gentle simmer around 180 degrees, which is what gives it that thick, spoon-coating texture later. Then you let it cool back down to about 110. Whisk in a couple of spoonfuls of plain store yogurt as your starter. Because the live cultures in it do all the real work, snap the lid on, hit the yogurt button, and walk away for 8 hours. That's the whole thing. You come back to a full pot of thick, creamy yogurt. Want it like the Greek kind? Strain it through a clean cloth for an hour, and there it is. And here's the part I love most. Save a few spoonfuls of this batch to start your next one, and you'll never buy starter again. It just keeps going, batch after batch, practically for free. Think about it. A gallon of milk is a few dollars, and that same few dollars in those little tubs of yogurt would cost you 4 or 5 times as much. Over a year of breakfast, that is real money back in your pocket. Now let's talk about the cheapest protein on the planet, and how most people quietly waste money on it every single week. Dried beans. A bag of dry beans costs $1 or $2 and cooks up into about the same amount as 4 or 5 cans. But everybody keeps grabbing the cans because they think dried beans are a fuss. Soaking them overnight, babysitting a pot half the afternoon. Not anymore. In the Instant Pot, you go from bone dry to fully cooked in well under an hour with no soaking at all. You rinse a pound of beans, cover them with a couple inches of water, throw in a little salt and maybe an onion or a bay leaf, and pressure cook. Black beans take about 25 minutes. Tougher ones like chickpeas closer to 40. And then you just let the pressure come down on its own. When they're done, freeze them in 2-cup scoops because 2 cups is exactly what's hiding in a can. Now you've got a freezer full of beans, except you made them for pennies. They taste better too. Creamier and less mushy than the canned kind. And you get to skip all that strange, slippery liquid the cans come swimming in. And whatever you do, don't pour out that bean water or toss those chicken bones, because the next one turns your garbage into gold. Bone broth. The good, rich stuff that runs you $6 or $7 a carton at the store, made entirely from bones you were about to throw in the trash. All week, instead of tossing your chicken carcass, your beef bones, even the ends of your onions and carrots, just chuck them in a bag in the freezer. Once that bag is full, dump the whole thing in the pot, cover it with water, and add 1 splash of vinegar, which helps pull all the good minerals out of the bones. On the stovetop, this would simmer all day long. In the Instant Pot, 2 hours under pressure does the exact same job. Strain it out and freeze it flat in bags. And here's how you know you nailed it. When that broth cools in the fridge, it should wobble like jelly. That jiggle means it's packed with collagen, the rich, good-for-you stuff that those watery store cartons almost never have. I keep a stash of it frozen in cubes for when a recipe just needs a splash, and bigger bags for soup. A mug of it warmed up on a cold day with a little salt beats anything in a packet. I'll be honest, I thought these health rings were a scam. I bought one half expecting to send it back. 3 months later, it hasn't left my finger. And it does way more than I expected. Sleep, heart rate, activity, recovery, my cycle, and stress, all from one little ring. The thing that helped me most? I realized my afternoon coffee was quietly wrecking my sleep. One small change, cutting it off after lunch, and within a week I was sleeping like a rock. Now here's why I'm telling you this. Right now, the ring's 63% off. Just $60 if you grab it through the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. There's a 90-day money-back guarantee if it's not for you. But I'm keeping mine. This next one changed my whole week, and it's almost embarrassingly simple. Browning ground beef in bulk. When beef goes on sale, I buy 3 or 4 pounds at a time. I set the little trivet in the bottom, pour in a cup of water, plop the whole block of meat right on top, even straight from the freezer, and cook it for about 25 minutes. It comes out looking like a meatloaf, but a couple minutes with a knife and a chopper, and it's perfect ground beef with all the grease dripped down to the bottom, away from your food, which makes it a good bit healthier too. Then I split it into 1 pound bags and freeze them flat. Taco night, a pot of chili, a quick casserole, all of it becomes a 10-minute job because the meat is already done. Cooking 3 pounds takes the exact same effort as cooking 1. So why would you ever only cook 1? If you want to get ahead of yourself, season 1 bag for tacos and leave the others plain, and future you on a busy Tuesday will feel like you left them a present. Number 5 is the homemade answer to that pricey grocery store rotisserie chicken. Big batch shredded chicken. Toss a few chicken breasts in with a cup and a half of broth or water, and pressure cook them about 15 minutes if they're thawed. Closer to 25 if they're frozen solid, because yes, you can cook them straight from the freezer for those nights you forgot to thaw. Again, they shred into a fluffy pile in seconds right there in the pot. Bag it up and you've got chicken ready for salads, tacos, soups, and sandwiches all week. A whole rotisserie bird at the store can run you $7 or $8 now, and you can do the same thing with cheap breasts for half that and know exactly what went into it. And here's the waste nothing move. Don't you dare dump that liquid left in the bottom. That is chicken broth you just made for free. Pour it in a jar and freeze it for your next pot of soup. Speaking of stretching $1, this next one takes the toughest, cheapest cut of meat in the whole store and makes it taste expensive. A real Sunday pot roast, made from the cheapest cut you can find. This is the genuine magic of pressure cooking. It takes a tough, stringy, bargain bin chuck roast, the kind that would turn to shoe leather any other way, and makes it fall apart tender in about an hour. You never need the fancy cut, ever. I like to brown the meat first, right in the pot on the sauté setting, because that little bit of color adds a whole lot of flavor. Then in goes some beef broth, an onion, and a good sprinkle of seasoning. Figure about 20 minutes a pound under pressure, then let it come down slow and gentle. Throw your potatoes and carrots in for just the last few minutes, and your entire Sunday dinner, the meat, the sides, all of it, came out of a single pot. 1 pot to wash on a Sunday night? That alone earns it a spot on this list. And that cheap chuck roast usually costs half what a nicer cut does, so you're eating like it's a special occasion on a regular old weeknight budget. Now, if you keep your own hens, you already know the great frustration of fresh eggs. They are an absolute nightmare to peel. The fresher the egg, the tighter that shell hangs on for dear life, and you end up gouging little craters out of everyone. The Instant Pot fixes that completely, and folks call it the 5-5-5 trick. 1 cup of water, eggs sitting up on the rack, 5 minutes under pressure, then 5 minutes just sitting there as the pressure drops on its own, then 5 minutes in a bowl of ice water. The shells slip right off in one clean piece, even on eggs you gathered that very morning. Perfect yolks, no ugly green ring, no picking little shards out of the sink. I make a full dozen at the start of the week for snacks, fast breakfasts, and egg salad. When the hens are laying hard in the spring and you're drowning in eggs, this is how you actually keep up with them. Number 8 isn't really one recipe, it's a whole way of cooking. The dump and go soup. This is where the Instant Pot truly earns its keep on a hectic night and where all the garden odds and ends go to become dinner. A pound of those beans or that browned beef from earlier, a can or 2 of tomatoes, a good pour of broth, an onion, whatever vegetables are starting to wilt in the crisper drawer, and your seasonings. It all goes in, you give it 1 stir, and you walk away. 10, maybe 20 minutes later, supper is done. It freezes wonderfully too, so always make the big batch. One tip though, leave the potatoes out of any batch you plan to freeze because they turn grainy and sad in there. Just add fresh ones when you reheat it. This is also the secret to never wasting produce again. because that half an onion and those 3 sad carrots nobody wanted all disappear into a pot of soup and nobody's the wiser. Here's the breakfast almost nobody makes anymore because everyone is convinced it takes too long. Steel-cut oats. They're heartier, cheaper, and a whole lot better for you than those little paper packets of instant oatmeal. But on the stovetop, they want constant stirring, or they scorch. Not in here. 1 cup of oats to 3 cups of water, about 4 minutes under pressure, let it rest, and you've got a big creamy pot of oats with 0 stirring and 0 scorched bottom. I make 1 batch on Sunday, stir in some cinnamon and a chopped apple, and just scoop out a bowl every single morning. A splash of milk loosens up the leftovers when you warm them back up. And it costs about a quarter of what those fancy packets do. A big container of steel-cut oats is a couple of dollars and lasts for ages, while a box of those single packets is mostly sugar and cardboard for the price. And we'll finish with the one that saves the harvest. Homemade applesauce with not 1 spoonful of sugar added. If you've got an apple tree out back, or you got a little carried away at the orchard, this is how you put those apples up before they all go soft on you. Peel and chop them, or leave the skins on if you don't mind a little texture. Add about a half cup of water and a shake of cinnamon and pressure cook for 5 minutes. Then mash it with a spoon if you like it chunky, or blend it smooth if that's your thing. And here's what surprises everybody. You don't need to add any sugar at all because the pressure pulls all the natural sweetness right out of the fruit. Freeze it, or can it up in jars for the winter. That's a whole shelf of applesauce made from fruit that otherwise would have gone soft and rotted on the counter. The kids will eat it by the bowl, it bakes into muffins, and it even works as a stand-in for oil in a lot of recipes. So that's my real 10, the ones that genuinely earn their place on my counter instead of collecting dust in a cupboard. And notice how many of them come down to the same idea. Buy it cheap and cook it once. The yogurt, the beans, the broth, the bulk meat, all of it. That right there is the whole secret. The Instant Pot isn't just a faster way to throw together dinner. Used the right way, it's quietly one of the cheapest ways there is to feed a whole family. Now go dig yours out of the back of the cupboard and put it to work.